Hello and welcome to Obinna TV. So for now, this is a question that has been repeatedly about the creative arts, but not just the creative arts, but I think also about internship. So basically, can you take exposure in lieu of payment? That's because you have one of the leading comedians being accused that he does not pay the comedians under him. So this top comedian, apparently he doesn't pay comedians under them. So basically, Kenyan comedians who usually come out say that basically they are only paid maybe 1,000 appearance fees. Sometimes they're not paid at all. Of course, he is the leading comedian in Kenya, and everyone that has been good in comedy has passed through him. Though of course they have not surpassed him. So of course the likes of Eric Omondi, YY comedian, MC Tricky, they all attribute their success to Churchill. But of course, then the question is, can you take exposure in lieu of payment? Can you take exposure in lieu of payment? But then, because a lot of these people, of course, part of it is about organizing the venues, of course, organizing a show, a comedy show is not a joke, is not a walk in the park. Basically, you will have to come up with stage management, you will have to come up with sound systems, you'll have to come up with the venues, and maybe the 1,000 shillings that you charge everyone is just not enough. But then, of course, these people, they deserve something at least. These comedians will have deserved something, so I guess that basically then the means to afford them will have been at least to pay them better, pay these comedians better. But I think we need to be able to nurture. Look at Jay-Z, he nurtured Rihanna until Rihanna became a billionaire. Now even Rihanna is richer than Beyonce, of course. Not in terms of music, but at least in terms of her painted beauty. So that's how Rihanna became a billionaire. Of course, she changed her profile picture from that of her face to one of painted beauty, her cosmetic line. So basically, you can see how Jay-Z mentored Rihanna, and I would think maybe the same thing would have happened to Churchill. Maybe he would have mentored these comedians so that they could have become as great. This is not a direct accusation of Churchill alone. I think even at cafe at some point I wanted musicians to perform, and then they would have the maybe names on the walls of at cafe. So at cafe wanted musicians to perform for free. Then they would be maybe they would be put on the walls. There would be drawings of the musicians on the walls. So basically, they all get exposure, and this is not just a thing that is restricted to the creative arts. You have even in getting internship, you have a lot of people say, I just need we will be giving you experience, but will not be paying. A lot of companies don't pay for those that don't have experience. So the company says, yes, we will give you experience, but then we will not pay you. So I think, can you take exposure in lieu of payment? That is, can you take exposure in lieu of payment? But I think you need to give something small. I think even for the creative arts, I don't think you have doctors who are paid by exposure. I don't think engineers are paid by exposure. So why should the creative artists be paid by exposure? I don't think an accountant would really smile at you when you say you want to pay them by exposure. So I think even for Churchill, even as he mentors other comedians, maybe that mistake will not be repeated again. So that's it on whether you can take exposure in lieu of payment. So that's it now. Again, that's it now. And then another story is, why are African opposition parties crumbling? That is, why are African opposition parties why are African opposition parties crumbling? Basically, you have in Kenya, you have ODM. Basically, it went into bed with the government. Then of course in Mozambique, you had the opposition leader Mondlane being denied his diplomatic passport because apparently he will make the country ungovernable. Basically, he will make the country ungovernable. Then you have in Nigeria, the PDP lost power ruled from 1999 to 2015, then lost elections in 2015, and now is out of power. And people are saying, of course, there is one leader there, like maybe like Raila Odinga, Atiku Abubakar, who has been the candidate of the opposition since 2015. 2019, and now 2023. He was the candidate of the opposition, but then basically he has been defeated 3 times, just like Raila Odinga has been defeated here so many times. So then you have that in Nigeria, and then of course in Zimbabwe you had Nelson Chamisa, now ZANU, that is Forum for Democratic Change, that is CDMC, basically lost the elections. And I think maybe we have to address why is it that opposition parties in Africa, after losing the elections, they don't come back. Part of it is because the elections in Africa, the difference between the ruling party in Africa and the opposition party in Africa is not in ideology, but is in tribe and region where the parties come from. So basically, that's the difference between the ruling party and the opposition party in Africa. The difference is that basically it is in tribe and region where the parties draw their support from. It is not that maybe one is a left of center party where maybe they look at equality of opportunity. It is not that one is a right of center party, maybe where they look at individual dynamism. It always doesn't go that way. That is why I would say that parties in Africa really need to be able to be ideological based. If we don't have ideological based parties, then we are going to lose it as Africa. We are going to lose it because the thing is that our politicians really are vacuous. Our politicians are vacuous. I think that's what the former chairman of the Kenya Human Rights Commission, John Gizongo, said, and that's what even the former Chief Justice of Kenya says, that is William Tunga, that is the parties are vacuous. So basically the thing is that the difference between the ruling party and the opposition party in Africa is not in tribe, is not in ideology, it is in tribe and region where they draw support from. And this is why we need to make parties. Parties are mere election vehicles rather than being centers of ideological thought and opinion. Parties are mere election vehicles, and so how do we vote? Basically, we look at the surname of the electoral candidate. That's what we look at. We look at the surname of the electoral candidate. If they have the same surname as mine, then I vote them in. I say, this is my tribesmate, I will vote them in. If they have the same surname as ours, so then we say they may be a bad candidate, but they are one of us, so I will vote them in. And that's the problem we have. That's why the African miracle story always becomes a deferred dream. That's why the African miracle story is always a deferred dream. That's why the kind of development is always kicked down the road. Why? Because every time we say they may be bad, but they are one of us. And that's why then the African growth story, the African miracle story becomes one of a deferred vision. And I think a lot of development economists during the 1960s, a lot of development economists thought that Africa would be the one to develop first. A lot of development economists thought that. They thought Africa would be the one to develop first, but that didn't happen. It is Asia that developed first. Why? Because they had very strong leaders, authoritarian, yes, and I think they were authoritarian. People like Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore, they were authoritarian, but then in exchange of that is clamping down on political freedoms, they provided their people with economic freedom. So their people were prosperous. Look at Singapore. Lee Kuan Yew lifted Singapore from third world to first world in a record 25 years. In just a generation, he transformed Singapore into a first world country, and that is why he is often quoted as maybe the father of development economics, because he lifted Singapore from a third world country to a first world country within a generation. And maybe that's why we need to think of how we can transform this country so then they become that is, we need to transform our countries in Africa. 75% of the poorest countries in the world are in Africa. Just think about that. 75% of the poorest countries in the world are in Africa. Nigeria surpassed India as the country with the most absolute poor people. You can imagine Nigeria surpassed India in 2018 as the country with the most absolute poor people. That is 85 million. But in the same year, in 2018, Nigeria was the fastest growing market for private jets, you can be sure. And I think even for Kenya, we are looking at billionaires. Look at William Kabogo, basically saying he is worth 3 billion shillings. Basically, William Kabogo saying he is worth 3 billion shillings. Basically, saying without a doubt, without any evidence that their companies is running, that there are companies is running, that there are maybe services he invented. So basically, that's just the way it is that our parties need to be ideological centers of thought and opinion, and they need to be places where the most stringent of debates can take place, so that then we will have an Africa that is basically just we have politics that shape. So we need politics centered on ideas, politics centered on issues, politics centered on ideology. Otherwise, we don't have that in Africa. We don't have that in Kenya. And that's why the opposition parties are crumbling, because they don't have they cannot dangle the carrot to their supporters, because the ruling party, when it wins elections, it gives its supporters some meat to bite. But for the opposition parties, they don't give their followers some meat to bite. So they have nothing to reward their supporters, and that's why then the opposition party usually crumbles as soon as they have lost the election. So this is the time to really think about, reflect on the future of African leadership. I think it is time that we reflect on the future of African leadership. It is time that we build parties for posterity. We build parties for posterity, so that then that's how we get to develop Africa. Of course, I know democracy is not working. Why? Because our political parties, the pillar of democracy, are not just aligned with the top issues of the day. Look, we don't examine who has a better infrastructure plan, who has a better jobs plan, who has a better healthcare plan. We don't interrogate that. Why? Because we vote based on tribes and regions. Basically, from region A, if the president is from region A, then the opposition is from region B. And maybe that is how the country is divided. Look at South Sudan. So the president saw there are so many competing factions, so he just decided to appoint 5 vice presidents. Of course, part of it was stemming the opposition leader, his main rival, Riek Machar, but of course, then part of it was stemming Riek Machar. But I just think that if Kenya is to develop, then we need political parties that are anchored on issues, are anchored on ideology, and that's how we are going to drive the growth agenda. That's how we are going to drive the development agenda. Otherwise, opposition parties, when they lose, they will crumble, and then another party forms, and I just don't think that is the way to be able to form an election, and that's the way to be able to win an election. So bye for now. Till the next time, bye for now.